Yeah, I'll kick things off. So my name is Viriato Villas-Boas. I'm 34 years old. I've been skating ever since I was around 10, 11. And I was also brought up in the context of my dad who ran a children's home, that basically from where I was adopted. So I was abandoned at birth, I was taken there, and then my life kind of split between skateboarding and, being inside of this like big social work machine where I went from being a person who basically went from being abandoned at birth to then skating and then trying to connect all these dots between politics and, how can you get stuff done in a practical level. Without going too much into biography, I will go into the parts that I think actually move this kind of like approach. So skateboarding is this thing that it's really hyped right now. It's been a part of the Olympics for two consecutive editions, but it's also something that has always been that kind of like activity. I hesitate to call it a sport that kind of fits with everyone and around everyone. So a skateboarder is that kind of person who you will see as naturally in a uni campus or having a blue collar or white collar job, or also just hanging around in the sketchiest places ever. And skateboarders come in all shapes and sizes. So we have like a free pass per se to be able to engage with several groups from society because skateboarding is transversal to, race, creeds, and because of its relative easy access economically to buy a skateboard is not as expensive as buying a snowboard or as buying a surfboard or going into other more high maintenance kind of like activities. So skateboarding becomes that kind of thing that it's a busy access and then there's very little rules. So it's very appellative to people who want to be in the streets and just hang out. There's no coach yelling at you. There's no way to do it right or wrong. So it's that kind of thing. And you do it on the streets. So that's one of the most important things is you are in constant contact with the people that actually make up your cities, with the architecture that makes up your cities. And by consequence, if you keep your ear to the ground and you have, a set of eyes that's paying attention to your community, you will then see that you are engaging with people, some of them who come from impoverished scenarios, some of others who deal with racism on a daily basis, and you end up with a really cool multicultural crew. So with my team at WALLRIDE, which is a project that we formed to engage in human rights from the lens of skateboarding, I am lucky enough to, on a daily basis, be surrounded by African descendants, by Gypsy Romani community members, by LGBTQI, non-heteronormative people. So the good thing, or the thing that we learned that skateboarding can be really good at, is connecting a lot of people and sitting the most random and representative and dispersed people economically or racially or any other way that you want to look at it at the same table, because at the end of the day, we love skating and we love skating together. And from there, we start to share our own personal histories, the stories that connect us. And once you have that emotional bond to the people who are with you, then basically you start to care for them. So from there, you start to see that economics are a big issue, especially in Portugal right now, where rents are absolutely out of control. People don't have access to affordable housing, where racism is an under-discussed and overused or over pretty much present issue in society. And all these discussions start to form around the table of people that you care about because you actually do this thing that you all love together. So it's kind of work in disguise. So this is a little introductory part of the skateboard. What I think the takeouts is that it's something that connects people at a very human level, because regardless of how complex the tricks are, how you do it, you will all fall, and it hurts the same for everything. It's a very democratic process, and it helps to build natural bridges in a somewhat unnatural society and a natural world where we are increasingly disconnected from each other. So on the human rights front, pretty much there is something that I believe and I do see from our work, that is, if everybody is okay, regardless of who they are, then we can start to build a better city and a better community and better world in a very methodical and very practical sense. If all of the people that surround you are hungry, of course they won't be in their best to perform, whether on their board or as human beings. So if we care for each other's struggles, may those be monetary, may those be social, may those be mental health issues, then we are all uplifting each other. And the human rights part kind of digs into that because of how lucky we are to have a multicultural and multidisciplinary team. Then we also have our ear to the ground to all of these particular subjects. That's why WALLRIDE is founded in a context of departments. So each of these members of a community have a particular role inside of the organization of saying, okay, you are an African descendant, for instance, then you will be more focused and more in tune to these things, which you then bring to the team, which is also formed by members of the community. And we will all address that because your well-being is important to us, whether I particularly suffer from racism or not. So intersectionality is key here. With regards to, we already have that thing that gives us an excuse to sit at the same table. And now we start to communicate with each other. We start to open each other to pretty much other groups of people that were before that were strangers. And we start to address these issues in a more methodical way. It's something that I actually started calling radical empathy, which is, even though something doesn't affect you, just look at the things that really, really do move you in a negative way, most of them, and then take those feelings, transplant them into other people's realities, because pain is pain, and being set aside is the same for everyone. Bullying affects everyone the same, regardless of how it is enforced. So if we have that radical empathy part ingrained in us, then we can reach further and further. So now we go into the mix, because I did see how human rights and skateboarding actually affect writing and communication and politics, and especially contemporary politics today. And obviously this should be a very lengthier conversation, and I do hope that eventually we'll be able to engage with this. But I get excited with topics, and I was like, oh, I like this, I like that, and I end up with like a really, really big subject matter. So I'm trying to like knock down everything and then open the discussion if need be, or if there's a will to do so. So basically, when it comes to writing, so I'm introducing all of the pieces and then connecting them. So when we talk about writing, there's one cliche that you read about, or that people talk about every time. That is, if you want to be a good writer, you need to be a good reader. You need to be an avid reader. And that's because you need vocabulary. It's not just about basically copying someone's style, etc. It's about, you need tools to be able to express yourself and engage with yourself. Take, for instance, English is not my first language, and I can express myself in English sometimes better than I can in Portuguese because of the fact that I studied abroad and I studied in the UK, and like the amount of reading and the amount of volume, sheer volume of knowledge that I have acquired has been, academically speaking, has been in the English language. So vocabulary matters. So you need to read a lot, whether that's a skateboarding magazine, whether it's an academic paper or a book. Vocabulary matters because we all need to be understood. And for us to be understood, we need to be able to express ourselves emotionally as well. So I've been pointed out a study, which I would love to quote, but I can only say it anecdotally, that people who don't read as much or who don't have as much vocabulary tend to be somewhat louder or express their feelings a little bit more explosively rather than in a calmer manner. And that comes to the fact that we all have stuff to bring to the world. We all have intimate connections that we want to achieve with our world, with the world around us, whether that it's for a purpose focused on human rights or whatever, career-wise, anything, or whether that is just for the fact that we are social animals and we are here to engage with each other. So we need to read a lot so we can simply have the tools to express ourselves, because feeling sad, for instance, or feeling frustrated are not exactly the same things. And the more we actually be able to expect to project that and communicate that, the more we can start to build a better reality around us. So augmenting our particular knowledge on particular topics then starts to form the bridge between something very particular. So I know a lot about skateboarding, but had I never wrote anything or read anything about human rights, then it would be very hard for me to actually build that bridge. So the more knowledge we have in the world, so the more we are able to engage with the world around us and communicate what we feel and what we do in a good way. So for instance, I read a lot about quantum physics, and that in itself has translated into me being able to ride my skateboard better. And I'm not good with maths, but there are some logics that are transcendent. So I took a note here saying that it's basically the more you know, the more you think, and the better and more usefully you will be able to write. Because to be honest, there aren't any grand ideas out there. There will be, but especially in tech or innovation. But I do see that most innovation that comes out these days from the humanities and politics side of society is usually a very intelligent mashup of disparate ideas and concepts turned into something new. WALLRIDE is divided by 7 departments in that sense, that it's like you have skateboarding associations dedicated just to women's rights, you have skateboarding association dedicated just to skateboarding magazines and communication and arts, you have skateboarding associations focusing on human rights, anti-racism, etc., and even rehabilitation of public spaces. We kind of like meshed all of these things under one umbrella, and with our very small team, we kind of like aim at addressing all of these particularly. When it comes to communicating, well, I am a firm believer that for us to be able to communicate things, we need to be doing things. And if we are taking this to a more emotional or poetical level, if we want to communicate things, we need to be feeling things and thinking things and bringing something to the fore that needs to be put out there. So skateboarding is also transcendent because skateboarding has a big performance part to it. And when you're communicating, we do notice that there is a very, very big performative part of it. Things like body language, like the voice tone, the volume of our voice, the decibels that we put out there, the clothing that we have, the words that we choose to use, those are all part of a performative communications which matters. You can have the greatest ideas, but sometimes people just don't listen to you because you're not putting it out there in a way that is appellative. And this is, if I had to moralize it, I would say that this is not right. But in the world, in the present state that we live in, and politics has been the best example of that, if we're not able to express ourselves in a performative way, then our message will die in the process of it. So unfortunately, we are seeing politicians, as is the case with Donald Trump, as is the case with André Ventura in Portugal, as was the case with Nigel Farage in the UK, where the performance part was about 80% or 90% of the delivery. And then whenever you are able to actually deconstruct things a little bit, you will see that these are ideas and communications hollow of purpose. So when we're communicating in skateboarding, we're also communicating through style. We're also communicating with the way that the spots that we choose to film on or photograph. So that's the same thing with ideas and with politics and with everything. We're trying to communicate it. So the other side of communication, which I think a lot of people tend to neglect, is try to identify what matters to the other part, what matters to the other person in front of you, and how can we actually present it that way. So that's when it comes in handy. The part of the reading a lot and getting a lot of information and maybe keep up with the news is how, if I'm speaking to somebody who is into football and I know absolutely nothing of football and I know everything about skateboarding and I'm going to be speaking in skateboarding terms, I'm not going to get anywhere at all. So the more you know about general things, the more you can put it in terms of like, okay, when somebody wins at skateboarding, which doesn't happen, it's the same feeling as when your team wins in football or whatever the transcendent part of it can be. So I'll put this in a practical purpose with politics in the next paper I have. So, but basically, all great ideas today contextually in the sense of human rights and social work, etc., do come as like a conjunction of several ideas. When it comes to politics, we need to start separating politics from parties. Politics are important. Whatever we do, if we breathe, we eat, we live, we pay taxes, we pay rent, whatever it is politics. If we are in poverty, it's politics. But parties are important, and they're important of our general culture, kind of like toolbox, because if we are aware of the party that someone is represented, we already have at least a guideline to what the ideas and what the ideals of that person standing in front of us are. And we can start to do what I was mentioning before with communications, which is start to identify how the other part acts, what's meaningful and what matters to the other part, and start presenting our ideas to them. Because basically, if I'm speaking to somebody who's more left-leaning, I'm going to be speaking in more human terms. If I'm speaking to somebody who's a little bit more right-leaning, I'm going to be speaking more in investment and capital and etc. terms to achieve the same thing. When we rehabilitated the skate park in Faro, it was completely run down socially and physically. When I would speak to somebody that would be a little bit more right-leaning, I would say we're rehabilitating a public space that was pretty much part of public investment, and the taxpayers deserve that a public space is serving everyone. It is not a place of delinquency and violence. When we're talking about somebody more left-leaning, we're talking it in the same space. We're rehabilitating it, and we are taking care of the communities that are in a state of abandonment and neglect on behalf of civil society in general. And we are turning this place into what it is, a communal centered effect, a place where people go to hang out and become better at what they do. So the same idea, the same result, we rehabilitate a public space, we get the skate park up and running, we help people through the skate park, but we're selling it different if somebody is more right or left leaning. These things are very important to know, because we need to look at politics as give or take the rules of the game, and not pretty much something to run away from. It's all about politicians have resources, and we need to shift those resources from the people who have them to the people who do not have them. And that only works when you're communicating it in a good way. So when it comes to contemporary political landscape, there is a difference between navigating and communicating. As I mentioned the navigating part quite well so far, which is knowing how to pitch your ideas and how to end up with a result that serves everyone. But also how you communicate those things are very important, because communication is how you present the results of those interactions, and that communication has to serve you, so you can keep up those interactions and those friendships and those supports, and it also has to be able to serve you and your purpose, that you are changing the world for the better, and these are your allies and the people who are helping. Lastly, I think that knowing your limits is also part of that engagement and that communication. So, for instance, with our organization, we're not very comfortable to bringing in the extremes to the fore and giving them a platform, whether those are right-leaning or left-leaning extremes. So, by choosing not to engage in that point with extremist parties, that's also signaling in a communicative and performative way what are your ends. So, this is a little bit of what I try to cover all grounds of how skateboarding, communication and politics and writing are all connected. If anybody has anything to add, I think we still have about 7 minutes. There's any of these branches that you would like me, or that it would be good to dive into, I'd be gladly. If not, then I'm just happy to have dropped like a ton of very pretty much I forgot the word in English, but yeah, compacted information on you. And thank you so much for standing by for this, like running around, because it's been a hectic day as well. So Dominic is asking, is there, and thank you for still being around. I know I'm still new at this, so I'm not as engaging with as a lot of people. So is there a specific skate video that helps spark your passion for skateboarding? For me, it was Alien Workshop's Minefield. I'm in the US. The level of artistic creativity and expression they infused in the video really resonated with me. Also, is there a specific moment in your life that helped push and empathize your passion for human rights? So basically, yeah, Minefield, I still go back to the Heath Kirchhardt's part that always hypes me up, but I'm from the era of like the I started skating 2001 too, so I still got that late 80s. I think the Flip Sorry video were amazing to just hype me up, and then all of the Zero foundations, everything to do with punk rock and that kind of like edginess. Corey Duffel for sure, Chris Cole, those kind of anything to do with like this type of skateboarding. It still moves me. So basically, there were a few moments in my life that helped the empathizing part and passion of human rights. So being born and being abandoned at birth and being in a setting where if I wanted to hang out with my dad, I would have to go to his office, and his office was in a children's home with 90 plus children who were in very critical states. Some were abandoned, some were removed by the state. So, but it was also a very beautiful place to be. It was well taken care of, etc. So it was like a big playground where you would actually think, okay, that could have been me. That person could have been me at that particular point. So these were my little brothers and sisters. So that was the spark number one. Spark number two was when I moved to London, and I fell in love with someone, big story, somebody that I actually really like as a human being. And shout out to Bashir. Although she's an ex-girlfriend, she's an incredible human being. And she pretty much sparked that political side of my brain and saying like, okay, you have a brain, you can use it. So she kind of dragged me through my toes to uni, and from university, kind of like my analytical brain started like pulling pieces from here and there, and I got really into writing. And also there was the Brexit side of it, which I won't go into that, but living through Brexit gave me an eye opener, because in Portugal I was white, and I'm white, middle class, male, heteronormative. But in the UK, I was just another immigrant with an accent who didn't have, blonde hair and baby blue eyes, who was dating a Muslim. Although she didn't wear the hijab, she was clearly a foreigner. So Brexit was hardcore in that sense where, okay, now I'm feeling it. And once you start feeling that, then you start to empathize radically. So I'm going to jump to William. By the way, I'm going to leave my handle of pretty much everything, which is Viriato VV, sorry. If you guys want to continue this discussion and the time runs out and stuff. So basically Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, you can find it through that handle. So yeah, William said, would you say that skateboarding is a performance art and that all performance arts are a form of communicating? If so, isn't listening just as important as speaking? Yes, of course. I don't see skateboarding as sports at all. Institutionally, I have another approach, but that's a whole other conversation between the skater and what you're doing as a skater. But yeah, skateboarding is performance art. Is not only performance art. I think skateboarding is necessary for the fabric and well-functioning of our societies. So I would say that skateboarding is the last refuge of anybody who doesn't fit in and who doesn't know if they want to be in football or if they want to be at their laptops, or if they just feel that they don't fit in. Skateboarding will forever be that refuge, regardless of Olympics, regardless of this footballization of what they're trying to make of skateboarding, which I don't agree with. Skateboarding is a form of meditation. It's art. It's social work, whether you like it or not. You're out there, you're on the streets, you know your cities better than anyone, for good and for bad. So yeah, and yeah, seeing people skating is just as important as just performing skateboarding. So it's basically in that sense. So you need to listen, and as I said, communicatively. If you're talking to some politicians or to people who have some hold of resources that you need to listen to them, because you need to identify what they need from you. So how can you serve that guy? Does he need to be reelected? Sure, legitimate, that's his job. It shouldn't be the primary motivation, but if you identify that motivation, if you're listening to that person, if you know their party, if you know their left-leaning, right-leaning, etc., then you are doing the listening part, so that then you can communicate it back at them in your own terms. I hope this makes sense. So Dominic, I'm going to the last one. It's already 6 p.m. and I don't want to overlap with anyone else. So Dominic, Flip was my favorite for the longest time, Cole and Duffel as well. Awesome. I appreciate your ability to use skateboarding as a foundation to advocate for human rights. Thank you for sharing. Great speak. Oh, thank you so much, Dominic. This was awesome. It's been hectic. We're having events all over the place. So these were my slides. So yeah, do hit me up if you need anything. This was amazing, and I'm more than happy to share my knowledge with everyone. It's 6 sharp, guys. Hit me up on Instagram, on LinkedIn, or whatever. Let's keep this up. Thank you so much for everyone. I'm logging out now. You've all been amazing. Thank you for this.